If you'd told me 6 months ago that my wife would end up in a full-blown legal war with our HOA president over parking in our own driveway, I probably would have laughed, and then asked if we could sell the house and move to the mountains. But here we are. And somehow, this entire story starts with a megaphone and a woman in a glittery windbreaker yelling about emergency parking enforcement like she was running the Pentagon. It was 6:30 in the morning when it happened. I was half asleep, standing in the kitchen, trying to remember how to make coffee when I heard this garbled screech outside. I stepped onto the porch with my mug and saw Karen, our self-declared queen of the H, on her golf cart, yelling through a megaphone at my wife, who was still sitting in her patrol SUV, sipping coffee after a 12-hour night shift. "Get out of the car now. This is an HOA emergency," Karen shrieked like the suburban alarm bell she believed herself to be. My wife, Grace, blinked, completely unfazed. She was still in uniform, badge shining, hair tied back, calm as ever. She looked at me, then back at Karen, and took another sip of her coffee. Karen marched up the driveway like she owned it. She slapped a neon orange sticker on the windshield of Grace's cruiser and shouted, "You are in violation of HOA Beautification Code 14B. Unauthorized vehicle. 10 minutes to move it or we tow." Now, here's what Karen didn't know. Grace isn't just some officer. She's the county sheriff. And she was about to get her day ruined by someone who had absolutely no idea what jurisdiction meant. Grace didn't respond right away. She let Karen go on, listing off made-up rules about how patrol vehicles weren't listed in the HOA vehicle registry, and how the sight of a police cruiser caused community anxiety. I was watching from the porch, still in my robe, wondering if this was real life or some parody sketch. Then Karen pulled out her clipboard and started snapping pictures. Visual clutter. Non-regulation tires. Disrupting neighborhood aesthetics. She was on a roll. I almost admired her commitment to delusion. Grace finally stepped out of the car, all 5 feet 9 inches of calm authority, and said, "Ma'am, are you sure you want to continue this conversation on record?" Karen scoffed. "Oh, please. We've had people pretend to be cops before. You're not scaring anyone." And then, as if to drive her point home, she called for backup. 2 HOA volunteers showed up wearing matching windbreakers that said neighborhood enforcement. One had a fake badge clipped to his belt. The other had a ruler and started measuring the distance from the tire to the sidewalk. I started filming, not out of malice, but because I knew this was about to go downhill faster than Karen's golf cart on a wet driveway. Grace didn't yell, didn't flash her badge. She simply tapped her earpiece and called in a code. 10-45A. Harassment of a law enforcement officer. Karen was still ranting, saying her cousin on the zoning board would be here shortly to validate the arrest. Grace waited. 5 minutes later, 3 patrol cars pulled up. Karen smiled like she'd just won a prize. Until the officers stepped out, nodded at Grace, and one said, "Sheriff, everything all right here?" Karen's smile cracked. "Sheriff? What do you mean, Sheriff?" Grace showed her badge. County Sheriff Grace Delaney. Karen's face went through 7 shades of confusion. One of her HOA henchmen tried to slink away but tripped over a garden gnome. The other suddenly remembered he had somewhere to be. The officers asked if Grace wanted to press charges. She declined, but said she would file a formal complaint. Karen demanded proof that the driveway was exempt from HOA jurisdiction, so I brought out the deed. It clearly stated our property was grandfathered out before the HOA bylaws ever came into effect. Karen mumbled something about updating the registry herself. Grace just smiled and said, "Did you file that update with the county land office?" Karen didn't answer. She just turned and drove off, knocking over our recycling bin on the way. I looked at Grace. She looked at me. I said, "That was better than anything on TV." She said, "No, that was the pilot. The season's just getting started." And oh boy, she wasn't kidding. The next day, a certified letter arrived. It was from the HOA, accusing Grace of impersonating law enforcement, creating a hostile environment, and parking an unregistered vehicle. It was signed by Karen. Grace read it once and said, "This got dumb faster than I expected." She called her friend Hannah, who works in the county legal office. Hannah reviewed the footage and laughed so hard she nearly dropped her phone. An hour later, she sent back a cease and desist letter citing misuse of HOA authority and impersonation of law enforcement. The following morning, a sheriff's deputy personally served Karen the order. Karen responded by printing flyers warning residents of a law enforcement imposter. She even included a blurry screenshot of Grace in her cruiser. Calls poured in. Some laughed. Others were confused. One neighbor, Dave, showed up with a thumb drive full of HOA emails Karen had sent, including a gem where she claimed sunflowers encouraged crime. Grace compiled everything and took it to the county office. What started as a parking dispute was now a full-scale investigation into HOA abuse. Karen didn't slow down. She filed a civil suit against Grace personally, claimed emotional distress, misuse of power, said her leadership role had been threatened. In court, Karen showed up in a beige suit with a binder the size of a microwave. Her lawyer looked like he'd been hired off a billboard. Grace's lawyer, Carla, was the opposite. Quiet, sharp, deadly. She played the body cam footage, showed the deed. The room was silent. Then came the moment everyone remembers. Karen on tape yelling, "You're not the law here. I am." The judge looked at her and said, "Is that you making the citizen's arrest?" Karen nodded, then tried to cite some HOA bylaw from a printout of an internet forum. The judge dismissed the case as frivolous and warned Karen that future incidents could lead to criminal charges. Karen turned purple. She stormed out. Neighbors smirked. One whispered, "She should have parked that ego elsewhere." A few days later, we got an anonymous folder full of recordings from inside HOA meetings. Karen had been rewriting policies without board votes and funneling money to her nephew for strategic enforcement. Grace submitted everything to the DA. The county launched a formal audit. Financial misconduct, unauthorized surveillance, abuse of position. Karen had built herself an empire of fake rules and fear, and now it was collapsing. The day of the administrative hearing, the community center was packed. Karen showed up with file boxes, ranting about conspiracies. The DA laid out the evidence. Emails, maps, the immunity clause, audio of Karen saying, "If I can't control the sheriff, I'll bury her in paperwork." The HOA board voted unanimously to suspend Karen. That night, Grace and I sat on the porch, lemonade in hand. I asked her what she was thinking. She said, "I joined the force to protect people. I just didn't think the biggest fight would be over a driveway." A week later, the HOA passed something called Grace's Law, a clause protecting law enforcement vehicles from HOA restrictions. We celebrated with a block party. Mock violation trophies. Kids wore badges that said, "Not you, Karen." Grace parked her cruiser sideways in the driveway. Someone played, "I Fought the Law" on a loop. People laughed without fear. Karen? She tried one last stunt. Sent fake security guards to our house. Grace identified herself. Asked if they wanted to be arrested or just embarrassed. They left. The county issued a warrant. When deputies entered Karen's home, they found a command center covered in maps, photos, and unhinged notes. She was committed for evaluation. And just like that, the nightmare was over. The HOA reformed. The threats stopped. The neighborhood healed. And every time I see Grace's patrol car in our driveway now, I smile. Because sometimes the strongest kind of justice is quiet, calm, and parked exactly where it belongs. If you think Karen got what she deserved, or if you've ever had a run-in with a power-hungry HOA, drop your story in the comments. And tell me what's the wildest thing you've ever seen happen in your own neighborhood.